This is Morning Express that you're watching this Thursday, April the 16th, 2015. Thank you for joining us. And that was a wonderful interview there that Sophia Wanuna had with Boniface Mwangi, ensuring that 147 does not just remain a number. It is not a statistic, but it is our brothers, our sisters, our sons, our daughters whose lives were cut short by terror. And this is a debate that we must continue because we cannot lose the war on terror. We cannot give them the upper hand. And here on Morning Express this morning, we have what we call the State of the Nation. And today we're talking matters security to ensure that this debate continues. But today we want to focus more on solutions. We spent a lot of time looking at the challenges that we have in regards to security and this war on terror. But today we'd like to concentrate mainly on the solutions, the way forward. How are we going to ensure that we finally win this war on terror? And joining me, we've got a panel of guests who would like to introduce now, and I'll start off on my extreme left. We have Simiu Werunga, who is the Director for African Center for Security. We also have Farah Maalim, who is a former Deputy Speaker and MP for Lagdera, which is also where the Dadaab is. And we also have Abdullahi Halake, who is East Africa Researcher at Amnesty International. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us in the studio this morning.
Nice.
Now, we'd like to concentrate on matter security and focusing on northeastern area because, of course, we all know what happened on the 2nd of April of this year when we had that terror attack at the university, and we lost 147 civilians, Kenyan students, children who had gone to further their education. And just like Boniface Mwangi was saying earlier, they went, you don't come home in a casket when you've gone to school. You expect to come home with a degree. So, of course, this is a debate that we must continue, but more concentrating on the way forward. And maybe I'll start off with the question of the day that we started off this morning, and I'll pose this to you, Simiu. And the question is, do you think the government has a clear strategy on fighting terror?
I don't speak for them, but I think as a country we seem to notice a lack of it. We don't seem to have a strategy to deal with these issues, because as a country we must learn our lessons, and lessons inform new strategies on how you deal with issues as they continue profiling themselves. The fact that we saw a bit of lack of coordination in Garissa, the fact that we are getting statements from our political leaders that don't seem to be coordinated, and basically probably not telling Kenyans what we think should be done as a way forward, gives us an impression that we don't seem to have a coordinated strategy. I think my problem is this: each organ of government has some modicum of strategy to deal with some of these problems. What we are lacking is a national strategy that has also been informed to the Kenyan people, so that as a nation we know this is where the country is going. But we also understand there are some things that cannot be disseminated to the people. It remains the so official things. But I think terror, those who suffer are the people. Terror destroys property, business, and lives. So it moves from being a government thing, it becomes a people thing. And if we have to fight terror, then we must inclusively ensure that the Kenyan people are involved. And I speak knowing that I also sit on the National Task Force on Community Policing, which is one of the strategies that the government is trying to use to ensure that the Kenyan people get involved in fighting all manner of insecurity in this country. I want to go back to your question, and I say, yes, while we have a few strategies that are all over the place, I think as a nation we need now to sit down and ask ourselves, what is it that we have that can speak to the Kenyan people, both politicians, security people, and everybody, so that we speak with one knowledge that this is what we need to do as a country to fight terror.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Farah Maalim, just like Simiyu said, there's quite a number of things that have come up, especially after the Garissa attack, in form of different organs giving us the way forward. Do you feel that this is coordinated? Is this strategic, or is everybody just speaking? You know, we have the deputy president who ordered the closure. We had the president, although he has rescinded the calling of the 10,000 recruits. We have several things that have been coming. Do you feel that this is coordinated and this is strategic in terms of winning the war on terror?
No. In reality, we have a situation in which we are trying to execute the functions of the state on a very critical component of the functions of the state, which is the security. Mm-hmm. In the lackluster, populist campaign manner, you can't do that. Mm-hmm. We're not in a campaign. We've come out of the campaign. We have a government in place. This is not a moment for a deputy president or anybody else there to be talking either in the roadsides or in church functions or in fundraisings and expressing such very sensitive, critical functions of the government in terms of security itself. The government has to act as a government. It has to do a lot of work behind the scenes. It has to maintain that coordination. It has to be seen to be a government in the sense of the government. You see, we're more or less getting a situation in which we have an NGO government. You know, NGO government is a body in which, you know, everybody has got his own ideas, and you've got so many of them out there, and coming up with all different ideas. But government has to work as a unit. Government has to have a hierarchy, a chain of command, a systematic manner in which it transacts the business of security and other businesses. And we don't see that, for example, now, because even in the manner in which the rescue operation itself was executed, it doesn't show coordination. It doesn't show a centralized, systematic manner in which there's a chain of command that essentially is there. The military was called in from the barracks. The police were there. All the services were called, including the prisons. And they just condoned off the place and created a ring around the place, and the shooting is ongoing there. I mean, some criminals are killing one by one. You know, you can hear the shootings.
So in your opinion...
And you don't move in there. You know what I mean? You don't move in there. It cannot be a function of the military. Everybody knows that. Military is supposed to have this firepower that protects the country and has got to have an enemy, another force. And the whole strategy of military fighting and the maintenance of law and order are two different things. So why call in the first place the military? And even if you have to call in the military, maybe to give certain auxiliary things, the rest of it is supposed to be done by the specialized forces. The rapid response itself is one thing. Why everybody else, including politicians, would take choppers from here?
Okay.
To go and out there, and then the real guys who are supposed to do the job is not doing. So what I'm saying is that we need to learn. We never learned from Westgate. We don't seem to be learning from this one now, the way things are going. The manner in which the response is coming in the country right now is also, it's kind of a hopeless.
You don't feel that all these directives that are being given are coordinated and are systematic to fight the war on terror?
Absolutely not.
Okay. I'll come to you, Simiyu, but I'd like to hear Mr. Halake. You are one who's on the ground. You are a researcher with Amnesty International, and you're well versed with that area, specifically in terms of how things operate. Do you feel, or rather maybe the question should be, what do you think is the biggest challenge that we're facing in terms of winning that war?
I think one of the biggest, I think the war on terror, part of the problem is that it's not a conventional war that we can win by using a lot of force. But it's not so much what we can do to win. It's so much what are we doing in making it difficult, in making us lose. I'll restrict myself to some of the issues that has been raised, particularly around the closure of the refugee camps.
We'll get to that shortly.
Yeah, but I mean, the other aspect is the question around, you know, collectively making look like the Somali communities or the Muslim communities are a problem. So if you collectively, you know, find everybody who is a refugee, for instance, or a Somali who's walking on the street, and we say that that person is a criminal, then you are creating a situation where there will not be a significant trust between the security agencies and the Somali community or the Muslim community. What will happen in that kind of a situation is that people will not, give you the information that you would want, because they have got better local intel, they have better understanding of the terrain, they have got better understanding of the individuals within the community members. For instance, after the Westgate, there was a huge operation Usalama Watch. But to date, I'm not 100% sure that any of those refugees or any of those people who are arrested were taken to court and tried under the Prevention of Terrorism Act. We are good at making big statements. And the other thing is, a lot of the time the discussions that I'm hearing is that we can fight terrorism by suspending some of our civil liberties and human rights. Human rights. But my question is, why is the fight against terrorism mutually exclusive from preserving other people's human rights? These things can go on concurrently. There is no Berlin Wall between, we must fight terrorism using extreme force and at the same time suspend our civil liberties. And with this one particularly, I'm bringing this up because the one thing that I'm realizing is that we've given in to the fact that over-the-top counter-terrorism effort is the way to go in order for us to fight terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we've got to think that is not the best way of fighting terrorism. Terrorism can be fought within the framework of human rights. It's not something that is extraordinary. We can fight terrorism within the larger framework of human rights, and I think that is one of the areas that we need to improve.
To look at. Okay, Simi, you.
Yes, I think we also need to be clear on this, and because we said we stopped blaming, now we are looking at what needs to be done.
Yes, solutions.
I think it's important that as we talk about our national security, we must divide it into two. We have two layers. One is at the policy level,
Mm-hmm.
and there's the operational level. Now, what we expected as a country is that with so many of these attacks, I think they are now going to 100 for those who are keeping count. The grenade attacks, the panga attacks, they are totaling to 90-something. As a country, I'll have expected that at the policy level, apart from our political leaders making statements and talking to Kenyans, not with the Kenyans, certain systemic issues should have taken place. We know, we have information, the government is doing 1, 2, 3 things. Our problem as a country is that even as we do policy implementation up there with the directives and policy statements from the policy makers, we don't seem to be holding the implementers to account. Because as a leader, you can issue policy statements and give directives. But these people at the operational level, why are we not holding them to account as a country? And I'm telling you, that is where our problem is. Mm-hmm. The president can say things, can give instructions, you start a national surveillance system, let's do a BCD. But Mheshimiwa, I will tell you, our biggest problem is with the implementers.
All right.
And if we don't hold them to account, that is the biggest problem we have in this country, that the people are not accountable for the actions they take, especially at the operational level.
Okay. Former Deputy Speaker Farah Maalim, do you agree that we have an accountability issue? Maybe policies have been put in place or are in the process, but we are not following through to ensure that these policies on the ground are implemented and those who do not implement are accountable?
Nobody has been held accountable for any omission or commission in our government for a very long time. We'll probably wait and see how the corruption, the war on graft is going to sort itself out. Whether they're going to walk the talk. But in reality, very simple basic things, like the father of the criminal calling the system and telling them that my son is in Mombasa, he's bought a car. And this is the car number, registration number. And I have a hunch he's definitely not coming for good things. He's coming for evil things. Police arrest him. Nobody moves. He's never arrested. He comes to Nairobi. The father still goes again and makes a similar report. He goes to Garissa and he says, I don't know what he's doing in Garissa. And he is in Garissa with his car. And he stays in our hotels and he stays everywhere. And nothing is being done. And even when the information comes out, we don't see now the Inspector General coming out, suspending an officer in the system, holding a few accountable. We don't see, those lapses being addressed.
Why do you think this is the case? Is it a systemic problem?
I don't think. I have never
leadership?
in my from the time, many years of life, from the time you were in grade 6 or 7, and you were able to understand the way things are being done around yourself. I have never seen us go this low in terms of accountability on government officers, on literally everything and anything.
And let me
so then it's, we have an NGO government. This is basically what I'm saying. Or you have a civil society kind of a government, which essentially everybody does what he wants, and nobody is held accountable. And if the worst comes to the worst, you are told your security is your responsibility. You get my point? It is our responsibility, we understand it. But for God's sake, when we take that responsibility and execute the level to which we can execute, which we are humanly able to execute, you can't go and arrest somebody yourself and take him to a station and interrogate him and get the stuff out of him and make sure that he gives you the information on an impending attack. But when you report to the right people and they don't do anything, and all that the government does comes out and says that we have been patient long enough, and then you go now and take on the victim, the very victim who is also suffering under this is the one who is told now, you must tell us the way forward. Okay. Or rather, you must solve the problem. And these are the kind of things. I don't know.
So there is no accountability.
Yes, I think, and these are things we need to speak now out very clearly. Like what Mheshimiwa is saying, in any country, the fact that you are given information and you are an officer of government responsible for ensuring the safety and security of the people, and something happens in any country, that is treason. If, for example, you are suspected to be involved in enhancing,
abetting,
or abetting crime in any country that is related to terrorism, that is treason. This country, like we are saying, Mheshimiwa has said, even after something has happened, and people know that there were lapses in issues of command, issues of ensuring directives have been followed, nobody.
So accountability is definitely an issue that needs to be tackled. And while we are still there on accountability, and something that the former deputy speaker has mentioned is the fact that some people report and nothing is done. And I'm coming to you, Mr. Halake, on the question of radicalization. We have noticed that there seems to be a strategy of indoctrinating the youth. And not just the youth, but even professionals. We've seen young people taken from colleges and, sort of radicalized. Now, you as somebody who has been on the ground and who is on Amnesty International, what do you think is causing this, and how do we counter? What's the solution to counter this? Because just like I think it was Mheshimiwa that mentioned, or is it Boniface Mwangi, he had mentioned that we have professionals who are being targeted by the terrorists. Yet when you look at our security forces, we seem to go for the non-professionals, those whose grades are, sort of wanting. How do you think we can avert this?
Before I answer that question, I just want to piggyback to the question of accountability. I think as a country, we have got serious accountability problem. Like 2007, 2008 would have been a good opportunity, for us to put people who committed what was probably a serious human rights violation, who haven't been held to account. I mean, the number of convictions as a result of 2007, 2008 is still very wanting. And so even in this one, this is nothing new. It's just a continuation of unaccountability and the continued impunity around serious human rights violation. For instance, the TGRC report has been handed. to the president, and it has not been debated today. And it had clear timelines when the timeline between when the crimes were committed and how the reparation will be done. We haven't addressed that. So the question of impunity is a serious question, and it is a systemic, and it's a question, unless we address it, we're just seeing it manifesting itself in the security sector. And because it's here and now question, it affects everyone, everybody is now talking about it. But this is a serious issue that we need to address. Back to your question about radicalization. I think it would be foolhardy for us to say that, Kenyan Muslim youth along northern parts of northern Kenya, in parts of Nairobi, and in parts of the coast are not radicalized. That would be lying to ourselves. They are being radicalized. Over the past few years, I think now it's in its 5th edition, Al-Shabaab has a newsletter called Gaidi Mtaani. In this magazine, Al-Shabaab has actually started moving away from just it being a Somalia issue to it being a seriously Kenyan issue. In fact, the first couple of pages are actually in Swahili. And some of the issues, what they have done is they have incredibly appropriated some of the discourses around marginalization and disenfranchisement of people along the Kenyan coast and parts of northern Kenya, and they have said the only vanguard against your marginalization and suffering, it's us. And they are using that as an incredibly important tool for recruiting some of these young people who feel like they do not have a future in Kenya. They have to constantly prove themselves as Kenyans, even if they are born and raised in this country. But we hardly hear people discussing this issue. Every time there is a drought in Turkana, we send something. But if you look by all objective indicators, parts of northern Kenya and parts of the coastal Kenya perform extremely terrible, whether it's doctor to patient ratio, whether it's the school, the kilometer of roads that have been paved. And I'm not saying that poverty is only one issue that is a pull and push factor as far as radicalization is concerned. But what is happening is that these groups have become fairly clever in trying to utilize that to recruit some of our young men and women. But I also want to be very careful about single causality and single solution, because that's where it will lead us. Poverty in and of itself is not the only factor that will push people into joining these groups. But also we have to be very careful in the same line, because if you looked at this, I think most of the September 11th attackers, all of them came from well-to-do family. All of them, whether they are immigrants, whether they were coming from the suburb of Zamalek or in Hamburg, all of them come from well-to-do family. So poverty in and of itself is not a cause. But for Al-Shabaab, they have taken it as a cause where they are using it as a recruitment. But then the question for me is, we do have a, maybe in very ad hoc ways, like Ndugu Simio has said, as far as counterterrorism is concerned. But do we have counter-radicalization strategy?
Okay.
Do we have a de-radicalization? As we speak now, there are people who've joined Al-Shabaab and they have come back, but there is no support system for them. And there are people who are here now. Al-Shabaab is using Twitter, Facebook. They produced the DVD, like even immediately after Mpeketoni, they had that DVD, which, over the past few years, the production it's getting a little bit slicker. But we do not have any response. All we do is get angry. All we do is just, denounce them. All we do is that, make people like the Kenyan Somalis, Kenyan Muslims, and refugees life, progressively difficult. But we need to have, there's not only one solution to it.
Okay, and I want to bring in me on this and ask you for possible solutions, especially in regards to radicalization, seeing that Al-Shabaab have purposely almost changed the game to, now targeting professionals and the youth. What can the government do to counter this?
One thing that I think we've not done as a country, I don't like talking about the government, we are people. One thing that I think we've not done as a country, we've not countered Al-Shabaab, serious and very effective propaganda machine. They've done it so well that they can actually pick you from where you are seated and you join them this evening. I've never seen anything that comes from us to counter that. Number two, why Al-Shabaab has been very successful, they have this policy of assimilation. They will turn you today from a Christian, make you a Muslim today, and tomorrow you'll have a position of leadership, and they'll give you responsibility. So you'll get so easily assimilated in their group that you actually belong to them. We've never countered that thing as a country. And three, even as he's saying about poverty, we know it is systemic, it is historical, but I think Mheshimiwa was part of this group that gave us the Constitution, and there's something that Constitution that talks about affirmative action, but in another word, legal word. What do you call
Equalization.
it? Equalization fund. For the last 2-3 years, as a country, I think we should have taken advantage of that equalization fund and make sure that all these regions that were marginalized were given preference through this marginalization fund to start putting them up. And I'll tell you this, I was involved in a GGLO program as a consultant with another team. And that's when we discovered that there was a sessional paper in 1965 that actually said the 20% of Kenya will support the 80% of Kenya. So you put a lot of resources in the 20, which is Nairobi, Nakuru, a bit of Mombasa, and a few other places, to support the rest of the country. I had never known why a place like Turkana had never been developed. But it's because this 20 was to support the 80. So my three things that I've just mentioned to you, we've never countered their effective propaganda machine. They have made it very easy to assimilate anybody who joins them. And three, the ideology is actually beyond words. Now, as a country, and I don't know because I'm not privy to what the government system is doing, we've never as a people been told, this is how we want you to participate in this. Yes, I know Nyumba Kumi is doing community policy, but radicalization is another ball game.
It's another ball
which
game
needs to
altogether.
be dealt with specifically for that for which it is.
Former Deputy Speaker Farah Maalim, what is your take in terms of a strategy that the government should use to counter this strategy of radicalization?
I want to begin by telling you that the bulk of the recruitment of Al-Shabaab is either school dropouts who basically were into drugs and everything else, or they are students from secular universities. You would hardly see that many Al-Shabaab recruits who are from the madrasas into the extent which they have gone until they have achieved either high school certificate or they've gone to a university, an Islamic university. Because doctrinally way, in the doctrine itself, for a proper person who is either a scholar or basically has a scholarly footing, cannot be convinced by Al-Shabaab's doctrines, because they have very little relevance to serious Islam itself. So they are targeting converts, people who have been converted to the religion itself, but mainly from good backgrounds, in the sense that they are university graduates.
Right.
All these guys, all these fellas who had other Kenyan tribes. By the way, Al-Shabaab is not just a Somali matter or a Muslim, traditionally, historically, Muslim communities matter. It's every community. There's Luya Al-Shabaabs, there are Luo Al-Shabaabs, there are Kikuyus, and they're all there.
There's a story in the papers today that they're tracing some of the ones who are killed, and they're from Western Kenya.
Absolutely, absolutely, I'm telling you. They never told us the identity of the three guys the other three guys, they only told us they're the law graduate.
Right.
But the other three are not known. But one of them is a Tanzanian, by the way.
Right.
The fourth one was a high school student who was doing his A-levels in Tanzania. Or rather, this Richard guy.
So what moving forward, what would you say is the possible solution that now can be implemented to counter? Because they obviously have a very...
That's what I'm coming to. That's what I'm coming to.